pro-Trump content beat pro-Biden content 2-1 on TikTok.
Wow.
And that was insane, because that is when I started recognizing, holy crap, we are going to win the youth vote. Shortly after that report came out is when Biden got aggressive about wanting to ban TikTok. And so I became a big defender of TikTok. I was like, we got to protect TikTok. We got to do this. The president then, came out and said, I will save TikTok, which he has made true on his promise to do so. And I've been in this my entire adult life, and I've kind of been in it at a high level since I was 21 or 22. And, I've had subpoenas. I've had FBI come to my house, knock on my door while I'm playing Madden. I'm trying to have a good time, play video games, and 23-year-old Alex has his headset on talking crap, on Xbox, and an FBI agent comes to my house and says, we're going to serve you a subpoena. Like, the pressure, I think it is what it is, and that is the takeaway, and that is a saying that the president would always tell me. When the whole team's panicked, I look over and just see the president chilling in his seat on the plane, reading tweets or reading memes, and he's like, Alex, it is what it is. And this guy, that was his attitude as he was facing 750 years in prison, as he was facing multiple assassination attempts, as he was facing this very important election, but he was always so peaceful about it.
Every American who loves the new direction of our country owes a thank you to my guest today. Alex Bruesewitz is a Gen Z strategist, entrepreneur, and influential voice in the MAGA movement. As the founder of Strategies, I would best describe him as the architect of President Donald J. Trump's 2024 presidential comeback. He's the author of Winning the Social Media War, a guide for conservatives to reclaim online narratives, and spearheading Trump's innovative podcast strategy, securing appearances on shows hosted by Theo Vaughn, Logan Paul, Aiden Ross, and Joe Rogan, all while keeping my president away from that nasty wench, Alex Cooper, over at Call Her Daddy. He recently earned a spot on Time's 2025 100 Next list as a next-generation influencer reshaping American conservatism. Be sure to like, comment, share, and subscribe. Welcome to Respectfully. Alex, thank you so much for being here.
Hey, thanks for having me, man.
I've told you this many times before, but you are one of the most impressive people to me just because of how much you've done being in Gen Z, being so closely affiliated with our president, and doing an incredible job doing so. So when it comes to X Strategies, how exactly did it come about, and what are you guys doing exactly?
Well, I started X Strategies, and thank you for the kind words. And I started X Strategies when I was 19 years old, going on 20, in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. And the purpose of the company was to help conservatives communicate better online. And rewind a couple of years before that, I was 18 years old. I was sitting in my study hall in Ripon, Wisconsin. And in April, I tweeted a picture of Trump's hotel in Chicago. And I said the sign on Trump's Chicago would look just as good in the White House. Trump retweeted that post while I was in class. I was pumped up. I'm like, this is awesome. I became a major fan of the president, and he won a fan for life with that one interaction. A month later, I graduate in May, and a month after I graduate, Trump announces he's running for president. And so I was kind of following him and supporting him online all throughout that campaign. I didn't know him at that point. But I was like, I really want to get involved in politics. And I didn't know how. All I had was a few thousand followers on social media, some friends who I made along the way, like a young guy from Illinois named Charlie Kirk at the time, who I met when I was 16 and he was 18 or 19.
Wow.
And so after Trump won, I was like, I want to get involved in politics. I want to stay involved. And I was like, what I know how to do is social media. And a lot of conservatives at the time didn't know how to use social media effectively. And so I started my company, X Strategies, to help manage and grow conservative social media accounts.
Wow. It's so impressive. It's something that I'm grateful for, because nowadays, where people were calling the last election the influencer election or the podcast election, and before, you go back 5, 6, 7 years, people didn't take content creators seriously. Mm-hmm. But you starting with your origins being on social media, it really paved the way for understanding hey, we're Gen Z and we know how to win over younger people at a time where everybody just thought it was a joke. People are like, oh, what's some kid on Twitter going to do? And next thing you know, you're trolling BBC and then you're working with President Trump. I love that quote that you had with, I believe it was with BBC, where you said that their opinions haven't mattered here in America since 1776.
You in the media across the pond and here in the U.S., for 4 years, you guys called down J. Trump, an illegitimate president.
Okay,
not 4 days, not 4 weeks, 4 years.
Okay,
and it's been 12 days. Let us do our process. And again, your country's opinion stopped mattering in our country in 1776.
That was a fun one. That was my first ever television interview.
Wow.
And
started out hot.
And so the producers, you've been on TV many times, and I'm not sure how often you do like confrontational TV, but at the time I was 23 years old. I got off the stage at this big speech downtown Washington after the 2020 election that many people have questions about, including myself. And I had some words to say about how I felt about that election. And this BBC producer reaches out to me and they're like, Alex, we heard your powerful words today during your speech. You were very well-spoken and impressive young guy. We would like to have you come on. And I'm thinking, oh, the producers want to be nice to me. It's going to be a friendly interview. Maybe I can talk about my concerns about this election on their program. I get excited to go on. I said, I'll be on. And so I set up my Zoom camera. I'm staying at the Trump Hotel at the time. Set up my Zoom camera in the hotel room. And as I am getting introduced into the segment, the host goes, and we have a right-wing conspiracy theorist who was spreading vicious lies about XYZ at the election. I'm like, what the hell? And so I had to come in, started hot. I'm like, hey, look, buddy, nobody cares what you have to say in America. Your opinion stopped mattering in 1776. So, but yeah, these left-leaning producers, they always start so nice, and then they turn into not so nice.
And they had the right one with you that day because, it made so much sense to me when I learned that you were from Wisconsin because people from Wisconsin are straight shooters. I'm originally from Illinois, so I know how Wisconsin people get down. And
Where in Illinois?
I was born in Chicago, and then I grew up half in Chicago and half in a small cornfield town called Pontiac, right outside of Bloomington, Illinois. So I know how you get down. And then I saw this video of you on Instagram a couple years ago, and I laugh about it unprovoked all the time.
Let's see it.
I think you should be ashamed of yourself for how often you lie to the American people.
I'll tell
I just wanted to say that. They help you lose your Senate race, which is something like you retire from American politics because you're a sick man. Thank you. Nice to meet you.
Well, thank you for costing him a lot of legal fees with your subpoena.
It's the look at the end.
Yeah.
I need to know the entire situation. Like, you just happened to see him there and just walked right up?
Well, this was random. This was in MAGA country. I was in the Palm Beach International Airport, which is my hometown airport, and I was boarding a flight to go to Washington. And sure enough, there's Adam Schiff sitting there in the boarding section. And I've never seen Adam Schiff in person before, and I don't know if I ever will, hopefully not. And this is right after I got a subpoena from the January 6th committee in which he was sitting on. And, every day Adam Schiff was out there saying, January 6th, January 6th. And so I got a subpoena from these guys. And he knew I did nothing wrong. Everybody knew I did nothing wrong, but they sent me the subpoena anyway. They harassed me anyway. And I was a young guy at the time. I was 24, 25 years old, trying to make some money, trying to have start a decent life for myself. And I'm spending my money on legal fees, defending myself against lies being perpetrated by people like Adam. And so I thought this could be the only opportunity I ever see Adam. And so I want to share with him how I feel. And, I see a lot of these people, the man on the street videos, they, sometimes get a little confrontational. That's not my style. I like to talk like I'm talking to you. And so I approached him nice and calmly. And I just let him know how I felt. I was wrong about the prediction. Unfortunately, the people who vote in elections here somehow thought Adam Schiff would be the right person to send to the Senate. But he's a sick guy, and that was a fun interaction. I have some critiques about my haircut in that video. That was not a good fade. Some barbers are not great at fades, but yeah, that was a fun interaction with Adam.
That is so real at the end, too. I scope out barbers for like months. I scout. I go on their Instagram pages. I look at all their reviews. The first thing I look for is the lineup and then the fade because I've had people give me a moon moment and I just can't do that again. But,
yeah, I don't know. Some men, I don't do enough research on that, but I trust it. I meet these guys. They're nice guys. I sometimes get a cut like real quick. I don't really plan it out. I just need something fast. And so I go in and sometimes they mess it up. In that video with Adam, it was pretty rough, but the video went viral nonetheless.
Yeah, still peak internet content. You just had to be there. That was a moment on right-wing Twitter. I have to tell you that. And another person that you had a little a little shade with was Alex Cooper from Call Her Daddy. So I thought that this was hilarious. I read the Time piece that they did on you, and it talked about, when Trump was going on all these different podcasts, and Alex was claiming that, she tried to get Trump on Call Her Daddy. And I just want to read this, how they put it in Time. So Cooper later said her team had a Zoom call with Trump's team about the possibility of him appearing. Bruesewitz says that's not true. I was President Trump's team, Bruesewitz says. I never had a conversation with Alex Cooper about going on the podcast. Her team reached out to me. We never responded. I would never put the president on Call Her Daddy. Why not? Because one, she's terrible. She's terrible at what she does. I think she's been a detriment to society with the content that she talks about. And she's regressive, he says, when it comes to starting families and having happy, healthy relationships.
It's a good quote. Smart guy.
That's a great quote.
A smart guy who said that. No, I mean, Alex obviously built a big platform, and I think she's had trouble maintaining that success. She came into the scene really hot. She had the partnership. I forget the girl who she was partners with, and I think it was under a Barstool brand. And then they had the falling out. She got a little big for her britches, I think, and then she branched out on her own. And I just don't think she's very talented. And she was kind of a one-trick pony with what she would talk about, and it really is not great content. It's kind of created a society of young women who are probably not young women that you want to marry one day, and I think that she's responsible for a lot of it. Unfortunately, a lot of people are leaving content like Call Her Daddy for more content like our friend like Brett Cooper has a great podcast, right? Or Girls Gone Bible, which is a big podcast who's actually based out here in LA. They have great content. I think people are turning away from the Alex Coopers of the world and trying to find more wholesome, meaningful content. But yeah, she straight up was on this panel. I think it was a New York Times panel or a Bloomberg panel at a live event. And she said she had conversations with President Trump's team about it. And perhaps she had conversations with somebody that misrepresented themselves as being part of the team. But I was helping spearhead that initiative. I certainly never had a conversation with her. Her team did reach out to us. We never responded, per my knowledge. And nobody that I know also had conversations with her, like that actually had the ability to make it happen. So perhaps she had a conversation with like a stranger that said that they worked with us.
Which is not uncommon in politics.
It's not. And there's a lot of people who misrepresent. But Alex Cooper certainly was not somebody that we considered doing. It was not somebody that anybody at the high level had a conversation with. And I don't know why she said it, but she did.
That's the tea. That's the tea. Did you think that it was beneath Kamala Harris to go on there?
Look, I met the girl who managed Kamala Harris's podcast strategy, and she's a nice girl. Her name's Daniela. She's came from YouTube. I think she was working at YouTube before she got involved with left-leaning campaigns, which, there's a interesting pipeline there. But she's a nice girl, and she understood the importance of podcasts. There's this misconception that Trump did podcasts and Kamala didn't. That's not true. Kamala was doing podcasts. She did a lot of podcasts. But Kamala's problem was the more people heard from her, the less they liked her.
Right.
Because she's not a likable person. She's not an interesting person. The president, on the other hand, is arguably the coolest guy who has ever lived, at least in modern times. He was the #1 star in the media. He was the #1 businessman. He's been the president of the United States. He's an interesting guest. He's had all of these side quests along the way. He's the king of aura. Like, Kamala has a personality of a doorknob. And so, but she's just not an interesting guest. There's nothing that you can make interesting about her. Yes, she was the first female vice president. Cool. No one cares. All right. But she was doing these podcasts. Alex Cooper was basically doing that interview, was basically just talking to her base, which was not great. Like the president's podcast, he was talking to people who didn't agree with him on everything. And the audiences didn't agree with the president on everything. But when the president would engage in those formats, his ability to convey his message brought people to our side. So, I think it was right on brand for Kamala to do that podcast, but I didn't think it would have ever helped her with anything.
Yeah. It really showed that she only knew her talking points. Trump could go on there and talk about any subject matter for an hour.
Yep.
And not have a moment of confusion about what it was that he was talking about. I felt like when I was watching Kamala on some of these podcasts, it was like this pause of like, wait, what did my donor tell me to say? What did my team tell me to say?
Yeah.
And it was honestly really cringe to watch. It was painful to watch that play out in real time. But I do have to say, I respect that Alex Cooper was willing to sit down with President Trump, because I feel like a lot of the bigger left-wing podcasters, they wouldn't even take the risk of platforming President Trump, especially knowing that every podcast he went on, it was this viral hit, made people love him. I had some of the people in my family, for example, that couldn't stand President Trump. They respected him after watching those podcasts, and some of them ended up shifting their vote over.
Yeah.
So it was interesting to watch that play out in real time.
Well, one more point on the Alex Cooper front. Yes, she was willing to have him on, but that would have been foolish of us to put the president on.
Of course,
because that would have been a total ambush. We didn't want to put President Trump on total safe spaces. Mm-hmm. We wanted to put him with open-minded people, right? Mm-hmm. Like Andrew Schulz, for example, is a great example of this. Andrew Schulz would do podcasts sometimes praising Trump, sometimes very critical of Trump. Literally, the podcast that Schulz did before we had the president go on was him trashing the president's debate performance from a couple of weeks before. Mm-hmm. And he was very harsh. He was very critical. But we put the president on anyway because Schulz, we believed, is an equal opportunity critic. He calls balls and strikes as he sees it. I don't agree a lot of the times with the strikes he calls, but I think he's fair. Mm-hmm. Theo Vaughn's another example of that. Like, Theo Vaughn is not this MAGA guy. Mm-hmm. Theo Vaughn had Bernie Sanders on the week before the president engaged with him. But Cooper, she's never once said a positive thing about the president. She's never once said a negative thing about a Democrat. Mm-hmm. And so I think it would have been very foolish for us to engage with her. Mm-hmm. And, so we didn't.
How involved is Barron Trump in picking which podcast Trump should go on?
Well, Barron is a really smart guy. One of the most impressive young guys that I've had the privilege of meeting and knowing. And he's got a really big future. He was very involved. The president trusts his children's judgment. All of the president's children were involved in this. And, I've got a lot of credit for it in the press, post-election. But this was truly a team effort through and through. I was kind of like a liaison between the president and these different personalities. But the president really leaned on the advice of his friends, his family, and the people that he trusted the most. Dana White, the president of the UFC, he was another very instrumental figure in kind of kicking this all off. He sent me a list. He sent Susie Wiles, our chief of staff, a list of some of the top podcasters in America and their cell phone number. He said, these are people that we think you could engage with and get good content with. And so I reached out. Susie asked me to reach out. And so I kind of got started that way. Mm-hmm. And then after we get a couple of these under our belt, the president really wanted input from Barron or his other children or Dana. And I simply just kind of acted as a liaison and help, usher the president in and out of those.
Did you hear the story that Barron rented out a whole floor for a date recently?
I heard that story, yes.
Is it true?
Cannot confirm nor deny.
Well, if it is true, as he should, as Barron should, Barron has to make sure that whatever girl he's going to date is used to, a life of luxury. Not every girl knows how to be around that life of luxury. Not everybody knows that. And, he's going to be someone that's a true chivalrous man. So, Barron, if you did do that, I'm rooting for you, and as you should.
He's going to make great decisions. He's a smart guy.
He is. I've heard great from a couple of people I know that know him, like Bo Loudon, always says the greatest things about him. Can't wait to meet him someday. I do want to ask you too. So throughout the last 4 years, Joe Biden and Kamala Harris have given us these moments that, as someone that's chronically online, it was funny to laugh at them, not with them, but laugh at them. When you or when President Trump or anybody that was in your team would see these moments, did you also find them funny, or were you frustrated that, wow, are people really buying this?
Oh, I think we all found the humor in it. These were great characters, by the way. I've learned to have a great appreciation for the characters in the game. Mm-hmm. And I don't really take them as literally or seriously as I used to, because I've been in it as long as I have. Mm-hmm. When a congressional committee, like a Democratic congressional committee, would come up, right, and they go, "We're launching an investigation, so-and-so." 7 years ago, Alex Bruesewitz would be like, "Oh my goodness, this is legit. I'm terrified." 7 years later, you just realize now it's all a stunt. These congressional committees, they launch these probes not knowing that there's nothing there, simply just to raise money on fundraising emails or to get television hits on MSNBC or CNN, and nothing ever comes of it. And so, I just have started to enjoy the characters. Like Eric Swalwell, he's a very simple-minded person. He's a slow guy, probably special needs, but he's a great character to watch. He's got hilarious interactions. Sometimes he farts on television. Sometimes he has relations with Chinese spies. But he is a great character in the game of it. Adam Schiff, another one. Like you learn to have some enjoyment with these characters because Adam Schiff, massive head, like a watermelon, pencil neck. Like these are great storylines for these guys. But no, Joe Biden provided a lot of humorous moments. Obviously, what he did to our country was not humorous at all. Record inflation, open border crisis, war after war. But the day after the Kamala Trump debate, Joe Biden shows up in Pennsylvania and he puts on a Trump 2024 hat. Like,
that was my wallpaper for like 3 weeks.
Or Joe Biden, he was the night that Kamala Harris did her closing address to the nation. She stood at the Ellipse right outside of the White House. And she was supposed to give the most powerful speech of her life. And all the news networks took it live. Immediately after she was done, they cut to breaking news. And what was the breaking news? It was a Zoom interview that Joe Biden was doing with Hispanic Democrat voters. And he was referencing a Tony Hinchcliffe comment that was made at Madison Square Garden. And he said, MAGA supporters are garbage, not Puerto Ricans. And Tony never said Puerto Ricans were garbage, but the entire news cycle shifted from Kamala Harris and her closing speech to covering Joe Biden calling half of America garbage. And I found great entertainment in that, absolutely. And then the next day, Trump shows up to his speech in a garbage truck and a garbage man's vest. And so we did find the joy in it, and you play off those moments, absolutely.
I'm glad that you guys did. I'm glad because you guys were working so hard. All 4 years. I mean, every day, even to this day, working probably harder now than you were even during the election. So it brings me joy to know that you guys were able to laugh at those moments too. Because I would have loved nothing more than to fly to DC, go meet up with my auntie Lynn Patton, and just laugh at all the clownery that was happening throughout that whole campaign. It was just TV gold.
It was gold.
I want to know too, during the debates, for example, JD Vance had this iconic moment. I believe I sent you guys the picture. This moment. Did you talk to him about this moment? Did he know that this was going to be a meme-worthy moment? Or was that just like a spur of the moment? Let me just look at this camera with a side-eye chat.
I certainly didn't have a conversation with him about I mean, JD knows social media.
Yeah.
He knows social media really well. I don't think he planned that for social media. I think that was just a, classic JD look and interaction. But he knows social media quite well. And actually at that debate, I was hosting a social media war room at Trump Tower in New York City. And I had a lot of our influencers there. I should have invited you. I'm sorry I didn't. No but I had a lot of these different influencers there, and they were live tweeting the debate. And it was kind of a sleepy debate. And, there wasn't really this great moment. And I was kind of getting bored. And JD was doing well. He was going against Tim Walz, who might be the absolute worst vice president choice ever. And so it was, a cakewalk for JD, but out of nowhere, Tim Walz says the words, "I have befriended school shooters."
Crazy.
And I looked around the room. I'm like, what the hell did you just say? I was like, we got to rewind that. "I've become friends with school shooters." What the hell? And then that becomes the number one clip of the night. Obviously JD's look went viral. And then it was Tim Walz saying that he was friends with school shooters that went viral. And, the internet let Tim Walz have it, and then he was asked about it afterwards, and he didn't denounce it. He didn't, and it was a fascinating time.
After that moment when he said that, I almost broke my wrist from how quickly I went to grab my phone. I lunged over to X to see what people were saying about that. That was wild.
Yeah, and my favorite thing now, in hindsight, Kamala Harris wrote her book, right? And she said that she did pick Mayor Pete to be her vice president because Mayor Pete was gay. She needed somebody that was not gay. so she chose Tim Walz.
Peak masculinity.
Yeah, okay.
Who got on stage? Wasn't he talking about how he could beat people up? He was acting all tough. Yeah, it was so funny.
His gesticulations when he'd walk out on stage. He's dancing. He's the dancing queen. But she didn't pick Pete because he was gay, but she picked Tim Walz. So I have questions about that one.
Smart guy.
Yeah.
Allegedly.
Yeah. Who knows?
So I want to talk to you too about TikTok, because one of the big things that won over so many people was this Trump deciding to save TikTok. Do you think that TikTok has an unnecessarily bad reputation, not just in the sense of privacy, but even just the sense of their algorithm? Because when you look at the numbers, the pro-Trump TikTok numbers, I feel like are a lot more impressive than anybody's giving it credit for.
Yeah. Well, I think there's a fascinating report that I looked at about 9 months before the election, might have been February or whatever. But New York Times reported something that was found really interesting. They said that pro-Trump content beat pro-Biden content 2-1 on TikTok.
Wow.
And that was insane, because that is when I started recognizing, holy crap, we are going to win the youth, start making tremendous gains for the youth vote. We were very popular on TikTok. Shortly after that report came out is when Biden got aggressive about wanting to ban TikTok. And so I became a big defender of TikTok. I was like, we got to protect TikTok. We got to do this. The president then, came out and said, I will save TikTok, which he has made true on his promise to do so. But I think it's a great platform to reach people. I think a lot of the content on there is probably not great for society. But it's not great on any of the platforms.
Right.
So I'm not going to act like TikTok is the only platform that is hurting the minds of America's youth. But it's a great platform for reaching young people, for reaching. It's also been great for American businesses. Hundreds of thousands of small businesses make their money off of TikTok, and so that ban would have been big. The president got the deal done, which I'm excited about. But we dominate on there. Yeah. I release our stats at the end of every month because we run the Team Trump TikTok account, and every month we beat the Democrats at the Democrats page by 120 million views. Wow. So I like to rub salt in the wounds, and so every month I post a nice, big, beautiful graphic that shows Team Trump, 180 million views, Democrats, 20. Yeah. And they don't like it very much.
I mean, it just goes to show the way the culture is changing. The conservative aisle has been dominating when it comes to culture and what's cool. Because even living here in LA, when I first moved here, I thought everybody was going to hate me. Mm-hmm. The first week that I was here, I was like, am I even allowed to go out and socialize? Is everybody just going to be so against me in the content creator space? First week here, I got so much love. I was flabbergasted. And what I learned is that behind the scenes, so many of the most influential athletes, celebrities, content creators, you name them, especially in West Hollywood, if they're not conservative, they're at the very least anti-woke. Yeah. Because they have been at the forefront of how bad it's gotten, because they're the ones that are supposed to go out and parade these woke ideologies that nobody behind the scenes actually believes in. Yep. And I have a lot of friends who work in PR who tell me that oh yeah, my clients, they all support you and I support you, but we have to pretend like we don't. And it's been so beautiful to watch that veil come down as more and more people are starting to become outspoken about it. And you can walk around in LA, you'll see MAGA hats.
And Beverly Hills voted for Trump. Mm-hmm. Trump won Beverly Hills. And I've been coming to LA since I was 21. So I've been hanging out in LA now for 7 years. And it's been fun watching the growth and of some of my friends who started off as totally anti-Trump, totally anti-conservative. And then they've progressed and gotten smarter and became more aligned with us. And we had a lot of celebrities that came out and endorsed us. Obviously, Amber Rose, who's a friend of both of ours, and a lot of others. But I was also having these conversations with very high-profile people who were being courted by the Democrats to endorse them. And I kind of got them to stay on the sidelines. And some of them, one of the biggest rappers, I can't name names, but one of the biggest rappers in the world was being courted to endorse Kamala, and then they had questions that they genuinely wanted to ask the president. And so I set up a three-way call between the president while he was driving to one of his rallies and this rapper. And they talked, and the rapper asked the questions, the president answered the questions, the rapper liked the answers, didn't endorse Kamala, and they stay on the sidelines. And so, it was, they were at least, these guys were giving us the benefit of the doubt. They wanted to hear us out before they made decisions. And so we had a lot of these guys, high-profile people that probably would have been against us in other elections, but they stayed on the sidelines this time. And we started more of an outreach process to them as well, and I think that's been successful.
Do you think that now that this is Trump's second term, that this is going to be the end of the MAGA era?
No. I think MAGA is a set of core principles that we hold dear. Strong borders, putting America first when it comes to all things, foreign policy, jobs, protecting American workers. I think that's big. Some of the cultural stuff, but MAGA has dominated the Republican Party, and we've taken over the Republican Party. If you look at who President Trump had to work with in the halls of Congress on our side during his first term and compare it today, we've replaced like 67 or 70% of who was there 8 years ago.
Wow.
And these are people more closely aligned with us. And there's only one way to win in the future as a Republican, and it is embracing the movement that President Trump started and staying loyal to that movement. And so I'm excited for the future. I think the president has done a really unique job of building up the voices of the next generation of MAGA leaders. The vice president is a great start. But you also have people like Byron Donalds, who I believe will be the next governor of Florida. You have people like Marco Rubio, who I think is very talented. You have obviously the president's children, and then you have the content creator class, right? That has massive followings thanks to the president's movement and his amplification of them. And so the MAGA movement is dominant online. It's dominant in the halls of Congress, and I think it's going to be dominant for the future.
See, I'm glad you feel that way, because people ask me that question all the time, and I feel like there's so much momentum right now. I don't see it going away anytime soon. I feel like, if anything, it's going to have a new face, but at the same time, there's already so many faces that are powering forward. It's not just President Trump. Yep. It's the movement that he has started.
Yeah, but it's important that the movement stays true to its roots and its founding. And there's a lot of newcomers to the MAGA movement, right? MAGA is a big tent.
Yeah.
And a lot of people, the media refuses to acknowledge that. They think that MAGA is like this one set of, we're very like unified or whatever. But MAGA is a big tent, and it welcomes everybody. There's a place for everybody. But there's a lot of newcomers to MAGA. And some of them fundamentally do not understand the founding of it. And then they try to introduce a new idea to it. A great example of this is the H-1B visas. H-1B visas is where you basically rent a worker for a cheaper rate from a different country. And, that is totally against the values of MAGA. MAGA is for the forgotten men and women of America whose jobs were displaced by these corporations and these politicians who either sent their jobs overseas or imported cheap foreign labor. Like, we want job opportunities in America to go to Americans. And so these newcomers to the MAGA movement learned pretty quickly that is not a popular position within our party, and they kind of got off of it. And so you have to have great leadership in the MAGA movement, which I know President Trump, he will stay very active for as long as he possibly can.
So a question that I get very commonly, and you kind of touched on it a little bit there with it being such a big tent over on the right. Do you think that there is too much division on the right for it to be repaired, or do you think the whole division narrative is overexposed? I
think there's great healthy debate on the right, and I think it leads to a stronger party. And I think that the best ideas will win in the end. And the Democrats, they have one path of thinking. They can't think for outside the box. Like John Fetterman, for example, differs occasionally from the party, and they're trying to get rid of John Fetterman. There's no room for dissent in that party. On our side, you can have these debates. A lot of times they're open, very open, and the best ideas win. and it's a capitalistic approach to it. And so I don't, I think there's too much hype that gets read. You read too much into the hype of online beefs. I think that's where a lot of people go. That's where the division comes from. But it's, these online beefs, there's a game to it.
Right.
So, but the best ideas will win. I think debate's healthy for the party.
See, I personally don't think that the division is as intense as people think it is off of Twitter. Like off of X, because X is the place where we're supposed to hash it out, where we're supposed to compete our ideas, have that kind of discourse. But when you go to conventions or rallies or Turning Point USA events, I don't see that tension there. That animosity isn't there. I feel like everybody's able to, come together and celebrate. At the end of the day, we could be in communism right now. And because we're still in freedom and because, things are getting better, I feel like it's not as bad as people think.
Yeah, but you also don't want everybody agreeing all the time on everything. And but when it comes time to unite, I think we do a good job of uniting.
Yeah.
But in the primary process, we always have a healthy primary process. There's always people that run, and fortunately, for the last 3 election cycles, the MAGA candidate has been the top of our ticket for president. Typically, MAGA candidates win their primaries in whether for Senate or for governor or for Congress, whatever it may be. But there's always a debate. There's always a primary process. Our ideas, the MAGA ideas, typically just win on the Republican side. And the Democrats, they pick winners and losers before the primary starts. Like Kamala never got one single primary vote. They just crowned her. They said, "You're our nominee." And so they say no kings, right? All the time they say no kings. But they literally crowned somebody on the Democrat side last year. So they're totally hypocritical on that. I think the debate is good for our side, and I believe that the MAGA ideas will continue to win.
I have another question for you. What did you learn from the aftermath of President Trump being shot?
Well, I learned that we are in a much bigger fight than a political fight. I think, and same with Charlie. After the 2024 election, I've kind of wanted to check out of politics for a while, and I was having one foot in, one foot out. I didn't go into the administration. I'm trying to start a family this year. I'm trying to start some different business ventures. I've been in politics, again, like we started talking about when we first started, when I was 19 years old. That's all I've known in my entire adult life. And so I was kind of excited after the president won. I was like, I can kind of check out a little bit. But, one election isn't going to save the country. And what I learned after the president got shot is that we are not in a political fight anymore. We are in something much deeper. There's a sick ideology that's been circulating throughout our country. It's a cultural battle. It is a spiritual battle, and it takes every decent person to get involved and say enough. But yeah, I think the biggest takeaway is that this is much deeper than politics.
Mm-hmm. Do you ever feel like the pressure is too much?
No. It's kind of been weird though, because again, I've been in this my entire adult life, and I've kind of been in it at a high level since I was 21 or 22. Mm-hmm. And, I've had subpoenas, I've had FBI come to my house, knock on my door while I'm playing Madden. I'm trying to have a good time, play video games, and, 23-year-old Alex has his headset on talking crap, on Xbox, and an FBI agent comes to my house and says, "We're going to serve you a subpoena." Like, when you go through stuff like that at 23 or 24 years old, and then nothing ever comes of it, you kind of learn that it is what it is. And I'm also a believer in God, and I am a Christian. I'm grown much deeper in my faith over the last couple of years. But the pressure, I think it is what it is, and that is a takeaway, and that is a saying that the president would always tell me, because I would see him on the campaign trail, and I would see, how could I be stressed if the guy who's running isn't?
It's fair.
So Trump was always so stoic, and I don't know where he gets this. I believe he's a deep believer in God. He's just not as vocal about it as some, but he has a presence about him. He's always cool. And if you look at the pictures of the presidents when they start and when they leave, he's the only one who looks like he got younger, and that's because he has this peace about him. Mm-hmm. And so in the midst of the most chaotic moments on the campaign trail, when the whole team's panicked, And I look over and just see the president chilling in his seat on the plane, reading tweets or reading memes, looking at memes. And he's like, Alex, it is what it is. And this guy, that was his attitude as he was facing 750 years in prison, as he was facing multiple assassination attempts, as he was facing like this very important election, but he was always so peaceful about it. And so spending time around him gave me, a little bit more peace of mind. Going through some of these experiences that I've had at such a young age have made me a little bit more, comfortable under pressure. But it's worth it. The game is certainly worth it.
Wow. Well, Alex, I'm so grateful for your time. Thank you again for coming here, and congratulations on everything. Congrats on your engagement. Congrats on your first Air One smoothie. Congrats on Time 100. And I feel like every American owes you a thank you. And I just want to shake your hand and say it for him.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, man. This was fun.